So welcome, everybody. My name is Michelle Singer. I am the Adult Programs Coordinator for the Kellogg-Hubbard Library, and it is my privilege to put together PoemCity every year for the library, or at least for the past couple of years. I took over the job from Rachel Seneschal and worked with her for many years. She's the founder of PoemCity, and it is a program of the Kellogg-Hubbard Library, and we have 250 poems up in almost 100 venues downtown in Montpelier. We even expanded into the Berlin Mall and have artwork and poetry at the Berlin Mall. And we have 20 programs, of which this is one of them. And we are very happy to have you all here with us to celebrate National Poetry Month. And I will say it, and George will say it, and a lot of us will say it. I don't know that anybody does National Poetry Month better than Montpelier, Vermont.
Yeah.
So, and part of that is, and part of the reason is because we have people who come to poetry programming for 20 programs a month, or sometimes we even had 30 or 40, and we always have people come. So thank you to this amazing community of poets and poetry lovers in Vermont. So tonight we are very happy to be hosting the Poetry Society of Vermont and readers from their society. Please, if you go downtown in Montpelier, look at Walgreens. All of that display at Walgreens is all Poetry Society of Vermont poets there. That's where their poems are displayed this year. Yeah, so welcome to them and welcome to everybody. We are gonna have George Longenecker read tonight. He's reading from Star Root. Linda Quinlan, author of Chelsea Creek. Geza Tatrallyay, author of Extinction, Rebellion, and Arctic Meltdown. And Bianca Zanella, the Poetry Society of Vermont president, Phoenix Books poet in residence, and founder of The Paper Poet. And amazingly, the power of Zoom is bringing them together from Nairobi, Kenya, Middlesex, Vermont, New York City, and Rutland, Vermont. And I'll let them tell you which one they are and where they're coming in from. So I think that's all our business. We do ask people to stay on mute for the reading part, and we will open up for Q&A at the end where we can have a chat with the poets. But without further ado, I'm going to kick it off over to George to start the reading.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks to the Kellogg-Hubbard Library. I'm George Longenecker, and I'm here in the woods and on the muddy roads of Middlesex, and this is my wife and muse, Cynthia Martin, sitting behind me. You know, with what's been happening the last 6 weeks in Europe, I had to say something. Newly fallen snow covers his face, body facing gray sky. Of course he can't see, never will again. One arm outstretched to the right, as if he was reaching out when he was shot. Kharkiv under siege, everything gray, another Cold War. In the photograph, nearby troop carrier like a caterpillar, blackened, burned, tread blown off. Nobody alive shown in the photograph. Somewhere, a mother and father will get the news. Death doesn't take sides. We all decay and return to soil. A traffic lamp, a street light, a building, all dark except snow, newly fallen. Confirm your identity, the website login demands. What is it you need to know about me? I'm alive and wake up every morning. I was born in Salem, but my mother died a long time ago. I still miss her, but you probably need to know more. My heart beats at a normal rate. Just now I watched a salmon pink sunset. I tried to confirm the color, as there are no salmon in the sky. Could you identify with that? Maybe you need to know more. Back to my identity. I write poems, which you can find if you search. Hopefully you won't have to search too hard for meaning. But if you need confirmation, I can assure you that they mean a lot and were carefully revised. But back to your question, I confirm I'm old, but alive, and still have the Social Security card issued when I was 16. I love to walk in woods and meadows, love trees. I have a muse who I've loved a long time. Have a daughter we love, talk to her almost every day. Still send poems on postcards with stamps. Have all my vaccinations up to date. Have a dog who can absolutely confirm my identity by scent. But none of us can fully confirm anything. Like where we go next. Is there anything else you need to know? People who go to or live in the Montpelier Senior Activity Center may identify with this one. Release of liability. You must sign for your membership to be activated. 3 pages long, 5-point font. I consider skipping to the end and just signing, which is what most members probably do, but decide I'd better read it if I want to join. I'll have to absolve the city of liability for anything that might happen. I had no idea that I might be paralyzed doing yoga, writing fiction, or playing handball. And whatever happens, the city won't do a damn thing about it. By now, I'm sweating more than I would walking the city's woodland trails. Probably I should never exercise or write again. I had no idea I could lose life and limb so easily. Rabid foxes, rabbits, bears, and coyotes waiting to dismember and eat me, plus biting dogs, diseased birds, ticks, windstorms, ice storms, earthquakes, collapsing buildings, careening city buses, icy sidewalks, loss of sanity and mental capacity from any catastrophe attributed to the city for any reason, including but not limited to stress induced by this release of liability. So this is the last of these few new and unpublished poems. Then after this one, I'll go to a couple from the book. Sometimes I see a road sign and I think that has to be a poem. So we were on our way to see our daughter in Pennsylvania, and we passed Zelienople, Pennsylvania. And I said, this has got to be a poem. And I looked up more about it, and I said, this is definitely a poem. This is written in blank verse. That is unrhyming, every line in iambic pentameter, including the title. Zelienople, Pennsylvania. You can expect rhythm and harmony in Zelienople, Pennsylvania. Its name's in iambic pentameter. And there's their summer music festival. In Zelienople, you'll certainly hear piano, accordion, and xylophone, guitar, violin, and mandolin, blending with calls of whippoorwills and barred owls. With music and the greenness of summer, in Zelienople, we forget for a while arguments, mistakes, icy winter roads, a world out of time. Throughout the night, crickets and tree frogs sing to oboes, French horns, and ukuleles. So what's been happening in the world lately, I had to come back to one that I wrote some time ago from my book. In the poem, a diptych is a pair of paintings, often in an Orthodox church. So you can have a diptych or a triptych. And lesser used meaning is a poem of tribute or a statement of tribute to someone. Diptych. Early April at Yonksy on Hudson, I always forget how much I like the sun setting and reflecting orange on the river off Battery Park. I remember how much I liked this restaurant. I hadn't known if it survived. Across West Street from this cafe, the sky glowed with burning jet fuel. I imagine they gripped something in those final seconds, fingers curling, then incinerated. Their dust settled in this restaurant. I remember the Times showed how the blast blew open windows of apartments upstairs. I sometimes forget how much I like my daughter's fingers, so intricate, the way she uses her chopsticks. She flies back and forth from California often, but wasn't on one of those flights. People sometimes forget this has not been the only place, Leningrad, or even the worst, Nagasaki, though it's hard to remember when you're in the place where ash and dust fell, where bodies fell. I always forget just how much I like the Szechuan shrimp here. Lights coming on across the Jersey side, the sun still dull orange in the river, fingers of late light between the buildings. Some people upstairs were still home to see orange fireballs. I see the pictures again and again, so orange and huge, hard to forget those sanity demands we only remember so much. For some reason, I think of sweet smelling oranges. Humanity demands we not forget too much, though it's hard to think too much about Gettysburg, fetid sweet smell of 10,000 rotting, joyous vultures and crows coming for miles. I've never really liked large cities, but I always forget how much I like lights reflected in the Hudson and the sounds of tugboat horns. Only 4 other people in the Yangtze on Hudson, still early, time enough to get uptown to the play. Sanity demands that we not remember in our every waking moment bodies falling from the sky or collapsing in pieces on battlefields. At Vicksburg, vultures circling optimistically, hoping for another civil war or catastrophe. It was so warm that some windows upstairs were open that day. You forget how much force, how much dust blew in. Reality demands that we accept the dust and ash upstairs at Buchenwald, but sanity demands that we scream at diptychs of the dead. Sanity demands we forget Angola and Fallujah and here, but humanity demands we remember. I remember that the subway station is still closed at Battery, and we'll have to walk around the hole. We finish eating and pay. The ash and orange of dusk have almost vanished in the river. My daughter watches the water, chin resting on her fingers. Only a faint reflection remains. I sometimes forget how quickly it fades. One last poem from my book. Poems of fish. Behind stones and brooks, resting in eddies, they pick through detritus floating down, leap to eat gadflies floating on the surface, make their own verse from beer cans, fishing line, used condoms, their own dead cherry blossoms. My father helps me clean the trout. My mother pan fries it with butter and breadcrumbs. We light the fireplace, more for light than warmth. In the old lodge, bare wood floors and beams creak. A stuffed deer head watches from high on the wall. No past or future, just poems of trout who ignore syntax, live in present tense, flow on forever. My mother and father still with me. Only today, with our fish and fire. Thank you so much.
Thank you, George. Linda Quinlan, you're up next.
Yes. Thank you, Michelle and the Kellogg-Hubbard Library and the Poetry Society of Vermont for bringing me here tonight. So I'm going to start with, my first poem takes place in Chelsea, Mass, which is a town just outside of Boston, about 3 miles, very working class. And it's from my poetry collection, Chelsea Creek. And so I am going to read Popping Frogs in the 50s. Beside the soldier's home, the knotted rope swing pulled between our legs as our bodies swung and our toes touched the leaves below. This was before the boys opened us, like the names they carved on bark. They gathered frogs by the pond and threw them under cars just to hear them pop. Us girls held each other's hands and tightened our roller skates with keys. On the stoop, our fathers played polka and laughed at the frog crackers as the heat exploded into twilight. The porch light and shirts went on. I saved as many frogs as I could, but most weren't quick enough to hide in the summer grass. They slipped in oil as thick as mud. I sat down by the pond, making mud pies, listening to my mother yell about polio, as if that were the only danger. So, and the second poem I would like to read is not an apology, but my poems are a little bit dark, so hang in there, okay? And that's what makes me so cheerful in life. But anyway, this poem is called, it's about my favorite aunt, and it's called Chelsea, Mass. Thin as her February birth, my Aunt Evie swayed with every half tone, the spontaneous steps of a child living outside Newfoundland, the fishing village of her family's past. This wasn't New Orleans, where she might have had a chance, where anger and creativity collide. This was Chelsea, a city of bad daughters and warlike sons, where nothing grew but immigrants and hunger. Her father's madness beckoned him to an ocean death, but instead he crawled into dementia, soaked in beer and sadness, the smell of urine even when he slept. My aunt married one summer a man back from the war in Europe. His pale violence swelling out of every room made her a ghost. She danced at home over the kitchen tile that curled in the corners. She danced in circles while her daughter slept, until her husband took their child away, punishing her dance, commanding a beat from the suburbs, and snapped his fingers again and again and again, until even her suicide seemed clumsy. So, and the next poem I'm going to read is about her son, my cousin Danny, who I used to babysit. He was about 4 or 5 years younger than me. Babysitting Danny. Danny and I met for the last time at a Fifth Street bar, 2 doors down from his mother's old haunt, where I ran numbers for her to the boogie joint across the street. My hand reaches for him, then retreats. He is a tear waiting to fall on my cheek. I taught him to steal at Woolworths. He emptied his small pockets and delivered his haul to older girls he wanted to please. Balloons, eyeliner, and candy lips that bled into our mouths. His mother was 43 when she was found dead, empty pill bottles beside her, no last words in an apartment above Cat's Bagels. I wanted to steal something for him, to give him his mother's laugh, the way she held a martini and a cigarette. I paid for his beer and offered nothing more. He lags behind me. My car door opens and shuts. 6 months later, he's dead. Beer bottles on the floor. California sun on my face when I get the call. A gun in his hand. No suicide note. A lone picture of his mother on the nightstand. So, and this poem is called You Don't Ride with Jews. First grade came flashing through my last free summer, bringing lace collared dresses and the warmth of Sally Levin's hand to hold. I didn't know you then. Boston was 2 miles away, farther than the oil tanks that lined the bay, so I couldn't see the stuffed grape leaves, Syrian as your mother's bread. I was a backseat student with you sophomore year in college. We hitched to Key West, speed, song, jittering out Joplin through side roads to an all-night sleep in a park on Peachtree Avenue. We met in Women's Lit, recited Plath over the beach plums that lined the Provincetown dunes, swatted bees without keepers. And on the road, I wanted to stand beside you, arm raised in solidarity with every Black worker in a white store. The moon could have been a spaceship that night we crossed into Florida, and you refused a ride. I didn't see the Star of David around the neck of the woman who stopped the car, offered a ride, and I didn't know until I saw in your eyes the rage of generations. We stood in the chill, caught in the dim light of passing cars, and I see you swirling in a chair at a Woolworths counter the day before. Minute by minute, the sun rises like a fist. The wind shifts. I slap away highway exhaust through cigarette smoke. Listen to your words while kicking stones across the highway. The sound of trains scream and burst onto German landscapes, rip mountains apart. And I can't let you hold me just yet here on the side of the road. And so just to kind of lighten things up for a minute, I'm going to read a poem called Almost Old. Now, you might say that I am, when I wrote this, I was almost old. So I'm getting there. So almost home. The hitch to almost being old is the idea of Florida. Strip malls and strippers, a restaurant or two next to Walmart, other villages where Mitt Romney spoke of better days. 25 years ago, I took a train to New Orleans and stayed 14 years, living a dystopian life, held up at gunpoint twice. The smell of jasmine stayed with me even after the police came 3 days later. And rice in a coffin for Halloween and vampires in the humid mist. I can't just go anywhere anymore. 50 years ago, I moved to Aspen with 4 friends in a Jeep. The heated winter pool, lights and skiers, my first girl love. I left for San Francisco before AIDS, touching the hands of long-haired strangers. I could have found Charlie Manson in Peace Park among the girls I laughed with. Now, Montpelier, Vermont, the smell of winter air and morning moanings. I think of Florida, take a nap, reliving times with old friends and saying final goodbyes, words I might have forgotten. So, and for the last poem, if I have time, I'm just going to read the last poem. And this is also a new poem. And it's called Murder on Garland Street, which happened to be the street I grew up in Chelsea. So, my father shot a crow. The whisper of autumn leaves hushed by a thump on the ground, open-winged, beak heading north with the moss. My young son's standing next to him. He told me this on his deathbed. His blue and hooded eyes needed me to know, but I couldn't hold his regret. He's 90, diapered, lying on a hospital bed. He said he was a cruel man, yet not always. And I'm sure he was thinking of me, the time we made a dollhouse in the basement, little people sitting on chairs, watching TV. At 16, the keys to his 1956 Chevy. Nights at the hunting lodge when men cut off the balls of deer and threw them into flames. Why had he done that, he asked. Did the crow's mate mourn as he did now, lying with a blistered heart, the crevices in his body filled with medicine that can't fix him? Do you think there's a God? This man of faith asked his atheist daughter. And I have compassion still that sweeps between anger and love, back and forth, the way a broom does, unconscious of what it picks up. I open the blinds, watch them lift higher and higher to reveal the city. The death rattle stops, and I never want more than now for there to be a God who will forgive him. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Next up, we have Geza Tatrallyay.
Thank you, Michelle, and the Kellogg-Hubbard Library for including me in this poetry reading and the Poetry Society of Vermont. I'm Hungarian by background. I was born there, and my family escaped during the Russian invasion of Hungary during the revolution in 1956. So the events in Ukraine are really very searing for me. And like George, I would like to read a poem or two about the horrors of war to honor the people of Ukraine. The first one is from my second collection, Sighs and Murmurs, and it's called A Singed Barren Planet Broods. A singed barren planet broods below a burning heaven and smolders internally with fear and hate and anger. Bombs screaming, deafening booms and bursts of acrid explosives, unearthly shrieks of war's shocked victims, souls wrenching. Echoes heard above this tottering vista. Tears of widows and orphans, of mothers of dead sons, of lovers of soldiers flow freely in catharsis. Will this weeping wash away war's horrible annihilation and restore the splendor of the world? The next poem I wrote when there were the horrible events in Syria, and Bashar Assad actually used chemical weapons against his own people, which has been mooted this time around by Putin for the Ukraine. So this is called Sarin in Syria. The chuff-chuff of the chopper gets louder. Panic-stricken, I peek out from my hole under the rubble of prior attacks, vainly willing it to disintegrate. But no, I scream involuntarily. One of Bashar's dreaded barrel-like bombs drops from the belly of the flying beast, tugged by gravity toward the shelter where Duoma's vulnerable take cover, women and children, the old and wounded. And then I know, I feel it, I smell it, the acrid burning with every breath, the bleach-like pungency of chlorine gas, or is it the fire of sarin, or both? I look for a cloth to filter the air. As I hear the helicopter recede, I rush toward the demolished refuge, desperate to unearth my child, my wife, still breathing, still whole of limb, still alive. My eyes and lungs burn, My stomach empties, but I dig deeper with bleeding fingers, shove broken bricks, piles of plaster aside. I touch the limp forearm of a woman and burrow for the fingers that tell all. I cry and convulse as the horror dawns and search among the dead for my one son. Finally find him foaming and drooling in a makeshift hospital, but alive. They say maybe chlorine mixed with sarin, chemicals long banned even from battle, but used here by Assad against his own, cheered on by Putin, Stalin's successor. The lily-livered West's supposed red line. But again, there is no retribution, not even a Nuremberg-like trial to punish this odious genocide. The next poem is, I guess, equally dark, but it's more personal. And it's from my third volume, Extinction. And it's called When I Die. When I die, who will grieve for me? Who will shed tears when the bell tolls? When I'm no longer conscious, no longer feeling and loving, will you, dear, kiss me one last time? Hold my ice-cold hand to your heart. And when my body burns to ashes or decays devoured by maggots, how long, love, before you forget my face, my voice, my touch, my laugh? When you walk through the fall forest, swim in our pond below the falls, will you remember our delight sharing such sunny summer days? And when you lie alone at night or naked in another's arms, will you still evoke our great love, the ecstasy of our coupling? When our children come from afar, over dinner and lots of wine, will you smile as you reminisce about my quirks, faults, and foibles? When you play with our grandchildren, sing them a song, kiss them goodnight, will you gently remind them, dear, that I love them with all my heart? And as you read these, my poems, my cello steers, sotto voce, will you try hard to remember the joy of our life together? For there will be no more of me, only what is left in your heart. The reference there is Cello Steers, is my first collection of poetry published in 2015 by PRA Publishing. Now, since I'm in Kenya, in Nairobi, I wanted to read a poem that I wrote the last time we were here, and we visited the Black Rhinoceros Reserve, where the last few black rhinoceros on Earth are nurtured by the local population at Lower Downs. It's called The Black Rhinoceros, after a safari at Lower Downs, Kenya. The black rhinoceros is a bizarre old beast. A crash of them on the move is a fearful sight. Loose folds of leathery skin, wrinkled and dirt-caked, sheathe that prodigious, sagging, brawny old physique, barely held off the ground by those stocky pillars. The ungulate's keen schnozzle smells you from afar. The floppy ears perk up to catch the faintest sound. Those half-blind peepers vainly strain to seek you out. Two slender, tapered sabers protrude from the snout, horns worth more than gold to poachers from East Asia, who butcher these splendid endangered animals and leave their carcasses to rot in the hot sun. Like other magnificent species on this earth, we have driven this creature close to extinction. Very appropriately, that poem is in my fourth collection called Extinction Rebellion. My last two collections that were published and the one that I'm working on now are very, very much concerned with climate change, which is an issue which I feel very strongly about. The next poem is again, partly because I'm here in Kenya and visiting my granddaughters, and I wrote this for my smallest granddaughter, who's just about 1 year old. A few months ago I wrote it, and it'll appear in my upcoming volume, Poems for Our World. It's called My Little Lara. My little Lara loves to loll on her cuddly baby blanket, or to ride horsey on my knees, snuggle with her loving parents. A wee wisp of a wondrous waif, with not a worry in her world of love and mother's milk, sleep, and those bodily functions. I dread the globe she will inherit, with its 8 billion people, sucking on its scarce resources, and wielding 1 billion guns as they drive life forms on Earth to cataclysmic extinction. So one more poem, again from Extinction, and it's also to do with climate change. And it's the very first poem in the volume. It's called Witching Hour. Is this the witching hour, the turning point, when the simmering seas boil, spill across the cauldron's brim to flood this verdant earth? Corpses of frogs and fish, seals and birds, our detritus, plastics and rotting hulls wash up with the silt to bury my feet. Is this the witching hour, the turning point, when wildfires spread, raging across the land and consume forests and fields, roads and towns, killing with burning heat and acrid smoke all life they find in homes or barns or nests, or frantically fleeing the fated end? Is this the witching hour, the turning point? We know damn well it is, but do nothing. We continue our hedonistic lives, complicit in destroying our one earth. So thank you everyone for listening to me, and thank you again for having me on this reading.
Thank you, Geza. Our final poet tonight, Bianca Zanella.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And wow, I'm blown away, George, Linda, and Geza. All of those pieces were so beautiful and moving. So my name is Bianca Zanella. I use she or they pronouns, and I am zooming in from Rutland, Vermont, also the land of the Abenaki. And thank you so much for coming to listen to some poetry, especially during National Poetry Month, which is my favorite month. So I've got a couple poems here so that you can get to know me a little bit. So this first one is called I Wish Everyone Wore Name Tags. Accurate. The biggest compliment I've ever received was from my best friend. Hidden as a bruise to my ego, she confessed, Bianca, you are terrible at small talk. Yes, I am. Bruise, nah, more like beam. Let how I flail at the surface of a shallow pool reflect the sun and shine brilliantly. You can drown in an inch of water anyway, and I prefer to swim in the depths, heartfelt in every interaction, genuine in seeking out connection. Yeah, I'm the worst at talking about the weather. Well, unless it's 72 degrees on a Tuesday in March and then 29 degrees the Wednesday, then I'm writing out a full climate rally action plan, and we got something going. You don't know this, but I am pretending that I already know you. That we have a 10-year friendship of crying at each other's beauty when we road trip to the beach. We've muddied up many a memory, eating Thai chicken wings off a sleazy Airbnb floor. We get real dirty and vulnerable. Let's skip all of that tonight. Not the memory making, just the not knowing. Yeah, I can't just pass the time. I'd rather forge it. So why not just wear a name tag? I'll wave to you from across the street and say, "Good morning, Rachel." "Hey, Ron." And you'll say, "How is your heart today?" And I'll tell you, I will. Thank you. I used to work in community engagement, and one of my projects was a unity project where I did have everyone wear name tags, so that one always comes through. Taking a turn a little bit, I also work as an advocate for survivors. And so this piece is dedicated to a client of mine called Success. Men who commit to suicide, men with depression, those men who are oh so dedicated to death. Man, oh man, it's true, even in this, men are more likely to be successful in suicide, in this field of suicide. I wonder if it's a field of poppy putting everyone to sleep. And women make more attempts, can't get it quite right. The first try, the second, the responsibilities weighing on her choice to die. Women, we're still learning how to sit with a dead body, our child's or our own. And men, businessmen, lovers, friends, fathers, men, how they get to leave us all behind and say goodbye. Thank you. For April, where you write one poem a day. I am, and I try to every year. And this is a fresh one from yesterday. Upon waking. Most mornings, I wake up both cow and cud, chewing myself apart from the seams. Literally, I am raw, and I am the knife that cuts. Lemon wedge bitters my bloodied inner lip. The lemon water upon waking is the healthiest way to start the day, right? 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 Thank you. This one, so I have moved, I moved to Vermont in 2011 for school, and I traveled a little bit, but ultimately returned to Vermont. Vermont has my heart, and I feel very honored to be leading the Poetry Society of Vermont as president this year. And kind of in that effort, I feel like I've been trying to learn more about home in Vermont as a concept and doing a lot more exploring. So I wrote this piece after a day of adventure. And it has an epigraph by Emily Dickinson, Forever is composed of nows, and the title is Here and Now. In nature, everything is resurrection. But here at Button Bay, hiking half snow, half muddy optimism, we have a forest of here and nows. Here the woods slow us down, redefine stability. Strong, even when the old trail is closed due to erosion, there's a new path ready to climb. How the water runs more river than bay leaf, and this movement too creates change. Today is not lost to anything but careful rest and patient attention. Yet still, we risk joy in each moment and melt like spring bathing winter in a warm fog. We see a flatlander wearing shorts and laugh. How you remind me to lean into these cycles of decay. Let go of any sense of belonging except to this place, this day, and this love I have for you. Now, you find me here of all the eternal possibilities to finish my mantra for me with a knowing smile. We summit the top and I chant mostly to myself, everything is working out. And then you finish, best case scenario. Thank you. And I have just one more. I hope that's within the time frame. This one I wrote when I was in the depths of online dating and really feeling that anxiety of like anxious anticipation, called Before You Are Chosen. Before you are chosen, it's like we are waiting for our photograph to be taken. Like we are celebrating an anniversary of something that hasn't happened yet. It's like when the lighting has already been lit and the props propped up, all prepped, but the frame isn't filled out yet and nothing can be developed if the camera doesn't begin to click. Snap any photos because it's like the photographer is waiting for you to arrive. It's like me saying, let's hold on for just another 5 minutes. It's like 5 minutes forgot about the 5 minutes. It's like hope, akin to breathing in a smile just before the click. It's like I am in anguish when I realize that click may never come. It's like you may never be captured. The photograph may never develop. It's like hiding in the dark and waiting for your eyes to adjust so you can see. It's like the moon attending a funeral for the sun, waiting for the next day to doom. It's like an endless reaching to become something other than prop. It's like the props the photographer plays with our echo chambers. It's like this is all there is. Like wanting, like looking both ways to cross a one-way street kind of wanting. It's like devotion, devoted to the mirror of the camera, exposing a possibility like anything can happen. Like I have finally given up any kind of control, like learning how to rest in this hopeful space in front of the man not taking the photograph. It's like paying for a photograph that won't be taken, giving value to a draft of a day that is never. It's like editing this already missing photograph, like we haven't been able to give time to, like crawling through strong chemicals, trying to expose light on skin, like questioning, how do we be? Beholding each other, become joy, like destroying the world one photograph of a fire at a time. It's like letting it burn, letting them all burn so I can adjust my lens. It's like gathering all the good up in a basket and then just forgetting it by the door. It's like being just outside the door and not being able to turn back to get the basket. It's like not having the key anymore, trying all of the keys on my ring and yet nothing fits. It's like knocking at a different door and no one answers. It's like attempting an inhale and figuring out that there are only exhales left in this body to give. It's like an intentional unfinishing, a turning of compost, an external earth. And then the camera clicks and I am blinded by the flash. And I can only feel, and I can no longer see who is there with me. I am just being held. And I am chosen by me. I choose me, and it's like the sun returned and it's tomorrow and I am in front of that camera, ready, smiling, stunning. Snap. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bianca. Thank you to the Poetry Society of Vermont for coming together tonight and doing this reading. I also want to extend my thanks to the sponsors of PoemCity, the National Life Group, the Vermont Humanities Council, the Hunger Mountain Co-op, and the Vermont College of Fine Arts. We couldn't do PoemCity without them. And now we are open to questions. Folks are welcome to unmute themselves and ask a question. You can also put it in the chat if you prefer. But we have a couple minutes here at the end where we can chat with the poets and ask them anything we're wondering. I want to go all the way back to George's reading and say, George, does that waiver form not Bill your Senior Activity Center? How real is that in that poem?
There really is such a form, such a release that you have to sign to renew your membership. I don't know if we've had to do it since COVID. I think we still do. So the details, of course, are a little exaggerated, some of them imagine, but yes, there is. There really is such a form you have to sign.
Some nice comments coming in through the chat.
Yeah, thank you. Nice.
Michelle, if we're just waiting on questions, can I make an announcement or an
Sure thing.
invitation? So yeah, feel free to put your questions in the chat or unmute. I also wanted to just share, in addition to all of the PoemCity Kellogg-Hubbard Library events this month, Poetry Society of Vermont is also doing some additional readings with Phoenix Books, and with Michelle again, an Emerging Voices reading as well. So that is going to be on April 12th and 13th. And so definitely come back for more poetry. Thank you.
And I think we're doing one of the, it's called Queer Poetry Reading, and we're doing that in, was the 25th, Michelle, I think? Monday the 25th?
It is.
Yep, and a couple of the poets we're going to read are here on this room.
Lots of other readings too.
Mhm.
So I'd like to comment on one of the comments that Linda made that particularly struck me was you said something like that your poetry can be dark, but that's why you are so happy in life. And I've often felt that about poetry, about other art forms too. But sometimes reading a poem can be cathartic. So you can go through something that is difficult, but then you feel that, oh, you've gone through it. And there's a sense of relief afterwards. And also the poem can bring you joy at the same time. But I was wondering if any of the poets would like to comment on anyway, is poetry cathartic for you?
Well,
Yeah,
I can start in and answer your question, Tom, about like, I think like for anybody who's writing and particularly is writing dark work, I think there's a universal feeling of death or childhood or grief or whatever, and it makes me feel like I am expressing that inner pain or that inner angst or whatever, and then I'm sort of like, okay, now I'm in the world and I'm happy. Not happy, relatively sane and stable, because I've been able to deal with, all the other stuff that tends to lurk with underneath the surface of your life. So that would be.
Yeah, I think for me, poetry allows me to dwell on some of the darker aspects of life, emotion, and thought, and it is cathartic, as you say. It does bring you to a better place, and writing about it rather than living it with other people in life is a much better way to do it. And a lot of my poetry, which I really enjoy writing, is exactly about those kinds of dark things, as I did with my poem that I read, When I Die. It is a very good point, Tom, that you bring up.
yeah, I'd agree. Like I mentioned in the diptych poem, Sanity, we do this for our own sanity. I know the poem isn't going to end whatever war is going on right now, but it helps me to deal with it. And that's what art is about, whether it's personal tragedy or an international tragedy.
We do have a question. Who are your writing influences?
I bet I know who sent that.
I bet you do too.
I can start since yeah, so for me, I come from the spoken word poetry scene, and so a lot of my inspiration comes from magnificent people like Rudy Francisco, Andrea Gibson, Mahogany Brown, a lot of just contemporary spoken word poets that I was able to actually work with through the National Poetry Slam scene and the Women of the World Poetry Slam, and I just look up to them so much, and so much inspiration from spoken word.
And for me, I worked with Martha Collins, who is a well-known, well-established poet at University of Massachusetts, and she was a huge influence for me because I felt like I was just like just a little working class kid and going to a commuter college, and she just encouraged me and really helped. And she's still writing today and reading. If you ever see her, you might tune in. She's really good. I worked with different people, and Sylvia Plath, I would have to say, was a really early influence for me. I really liked Ariel when I was young, and as one does when reading, maybe, I don't know. So
I could list many people, but for me, Marge Piercy especially, I took her class about 10 years ago.
Yes,
she had a big influence on me.
George, she was in a women's consciousness raising group with me in Provincetown, Mass.
Oh, when was that?
Oh God, 72, So,
Oh, yeah, long
Yeah.
before birthday.
2000 when you went
Yeah, I took her class in 2013.
13.
yeah, she's awesome.
I don't know. I got into writing poetry by well, first I started writing poetry in Hungarian, which is my native language, and then I started translating poetry from Hungarian and German and French. So some of the greats like Goethe and Baudelaire and others, I toyed with their poetry. So that's sort of how I got into it, and I think those influences have remained with me to this day.
Well, thank you all. It's been a really lovely evening and a great kickoff to the month of April and all the readings. Yes, there's a lot of readings for PoemCity and beyond. So there's no shortage. Lucky us.
Thank you,
Great.
poets.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thank you,
everybody.
audience.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.